Hello, everyone. I am tuning in today to talk a little bit about my empathic and psychic abilities and how I work with them in my practice. So, I have probably mentioned this before, but I have had a long, hard go of being categorized as an empath my whole life. And I think that one of the things that gives me a lot of resistance to claiming empath as a label is one, I think it's really damaging to take a quality of magic and then identify ourselves with it as if we are singularly faceted in that way, when really we are multifaceted. And then the other thing is empath culture, which is, this kind of memification and dramifying of the empathic ability, which every single human being has. And then I've also had a lot of resistance to being identified as a psychic. And in these past few months of kind of learning and growing in a new way, my nose was in a book for years. I was like reading and journaling and studying and using my intuition in a way that was much more aligned with being like scholarly, right? So I wasn't as receptive to my messages. I was, I think of it now that I'm doing oracle card readings. A lot of my research was very oracular in that I would be kind of chewing on this subject and really seeking out the wisdom that religions and spiritual disciplines had for me. And then in my study, the answers would come to me and through synchronicity and through divine knowledge. And there was a phenomenon that would occur that if I put enough information in my brain about something, that the downloads that I got would be much quicker. So, because I was doing that kind of work in such a structured kind of like, my Neptune's in Capricorn, so I was in a very structured way of studying and being immersed in. And now, as I move into, I mean, as we all move into the age of Aquarius, honey, like none of us are free from it. But, in my personal practice, as I'm moving into, first of all, claiming my femininity, which has taken me a long time to do. I have some feminine pleasure sex educators in my life to thank for that. But, leaning into my femininity was a huge part of releasing some of the rigidity I had about claiming empathic or psychic abilities. Um, and then the other thing that I was able to release was the thing that I kind of mentioned before, which is that there is a little bit of pressure in our culture, like it's a social media phenomenon, to really identify our personhood with a trait rather than allowing us to express traits. So, I think of it a lot about as my higher self moves more and more into me, I am able to act with more integrity. And so I look back on in my life at moments where I didn't have 100% integrity, and I notice how my psychic and my empathic abilities played into me making a difficult choice and, creating a little bit of harm and stepping all over people's boundaries. I really would love to make a video about, um, you know, psychic privacy and our role in the medium that I study under. She talks about the octopus tentacles. And I think that her actually putting it into perspective this way is what helped me finally admit, like, okay, maybe I'm a little bit empathic, right? But she talks about how people that are psychic and have this awakened, quality of themselves have these tentacles that go out, and it's our responsibility and our gift and our magical, I want to say like birthright, but I don't think that that's really, it's not something necessarily that is given to us because we do have to cultivate this skill. But it's really just not, first of all, it's not appropriate to have our tentacles in everybody's business, trying to feel their feelings with them and for them. It is very useful when, yeah, and I say this lightly because I don't want anyone to like take this the wrong way. But it is useful to have a high amount of empathy for someone who is hurting. But it is not useful to go into somebody's hurt and then feel the reaction in a way that prevents you from being there to support, right? Like, the empathic ability has its place, but the thing is, now that I'm in this psychic space of my body really being a temple, when I go to the grocery store, I'm like really feeling it, and I'm like mind reading and emotion feeling, and I'm really glad that I'm in a situation where I am able to kind of go out and have that experience and then come back and process it and learn how to have better boundaries. And one of the boundaries that I have now, which is it's very difficult to keep up. I notice when I slip, but I protect myself and cleanse myself every morning. And it's not a big, huge ritual. I just say the words out loud because the power of my word is to command miracles. Um, and I'll take a sip of water. I mean, I essentially just have a little poem that I recite to myself about how my will is my will alone, my emotions are mine alone, and I have a protective bubble around me so that any person or entity or energy that is trying to manipulate or control or get you know, I'm getting images of vampires and parasites. Any energy that's trying to do that, if I have this sense of sovereignty and a place in myself where I am safe, I just draw a line in the sand. It's you have to do it with ghosts too. Of course, you have to do it with people. Ghosts aren't even in this physical realm. Of course, you have to have boundaries with people. And I think that what's so difficult is, I mean, this is on a personal note. Like, I dis- I was first accused of being an empath when I was in a relationship with a narcissistic abuser, right? And as I started going through my recovery from narcissistic abuse, not only in my original story of childhood, but also in my relationships in early adulthood, it I was seeing all of these things that are saying like, oh, this is why empaths always get in relationship with narcissists, and this is why narcissists are attracted to empaths, blah blah blah. And the whole story of this is that, you know, a narcissist really wants to have their feelings and their story validated, and so an empath in the space of a narcissist will absorb the feeling and the story, and then if the empath isn't very good at um, taking care of themselves and controlling themselves and having good boundaries about what they keep and what they let go of, then they will also take on the story and then they'll validate the story, whether or not it's true, right? And, you know, it's complicated for me to see something so spiritual um, be so ingrained in something that's really psychological and clinical, like a narcissistic personality disorder, and really any of the cluster B personality disorders, including like, um, I can't even, not bipolar, whatever. I guess it's not important. But the point being, some of my feelings about being psychic and being an empath were really influenced by, someone in my life who, even though he had very bad boundaries and he would often lead me into places where I was invited to act outside of my integrity, which include things like compulsively lying. Um, I won't go into it because I don't want to trigger anyone, but the point being, this person also told me something true, which was that it is the responsibility of the person who is an empath to not play into the story that they're being told. Because here's the thing, like when I am perceiving someone's emotional world, it's very multi layered. And what I can almost 100% assume is whatever's on top, like whatever I feel first when I'm moving into someone's space, is probably not about me. Because from what I've learned, and this is kind of how psychology interweaves with the spiritual stuff and how it can become very sticky, um, is that, 80% of our present experience has to do with past experiences. And for someone like me who's a victim of, pretty intense trauma and still has a lot of physical reactions from that space, it's very easy for me to understand that somebody's emotions have nothing to do with me. But when I was in a relationship with someone else who had a lot of trauma and someone else who used that trauma to enact harm on me and relieve themselves of accountability, because you know how some people feel like just because they're traumatized, they don't have to take care of themselves or have healthy relationships or take any accountability or responsibility, right? So, this person is over there having all of that happen. Um, and it's easy for me to kind of say, like, oh, yeah, I understand that. That's what I'm going through too, right? But the difference between someone who doesn't have that shit under control and someone who does is someone who's willing to take responsibility for the fact that whatever I am perceiving in someone else is not mine to carry. And if I continue to carry other people's emotional and even psychic, like the other thing is that I think I really didn't realize until I was in this very specific relationship where this was while I was cultivating magic. We met on the solstice. There was a very spiritual connection. I was having a lot of downloads during this relationship. And what I found was I was seeing and hearing their karmic cycles. And this was a moment when I was hearing voices and I was very scared of that. And now I realize kind of what was happening for me. Um, but I also understood that I am an angel on earth and I was offered the opportunity to stay and explore what it would be like to remain in this situation with someone who is using my goodness and my purity and my compassion against me to gain their own karmic cycle ending, right? And eventually, what happened was I found my edge. I found as much energy as I can give to hold someone else's karmic story for them and hold someone else's emotions for them and take them on as my own and transmute them. I found my limit. And so now, if I'm ever in a relationship with someone that I really love, who is really going through a hard time and has really invested in our relationship, and um, when God sends me to do this work for someone who deserves it, right? Or someone who's going to be healthy and reciprocate, I will know how much I can give. And the thing is, just because we love someone doesn't mean we either have any obligation or any ability to go into their world, figure out what they're feeling, and then make it about us. It's just not how it works. And in that relationship, I really learned that. I really learned that no matter how psychic I get, if I can see this person's like past life and hear this person's thoughts and know this person so intimately just because I am opening up my abilities to them, it doesn't matter how much power I have. They are on their own journey. And I talk about this in Magical Consent too, if you want to go watch the Magical Consent video. Because the thing is, you can't wake people up for them. You cannot spiritually ascend another person. And now I'm going to talk about the patriarchy, because this is the other cycle that I get caught in, is that it is a woman's job to go into a man's world and fix them, right? I mean, there's also on the other side a man's job to rescue a woman from her emotional hysteria. Both of those stories are toxic, right? And what I notice is as I'm delving deeper into, my early childhood trauma and allowing myself to understand the side effects of that now, it has given me a lot of freedom to realize, oh, yeah, I was really young. I didn't know that I was picking up on everybody's energy in that moment. And so not only was I witnessing this, not only was I experiencing harm from this, but so were the people that were inflicting the violence. And when I am able to go into my history like that, that's a part of reclaiming my victim narrative. That doesn't mean that my PTS symptoms go away. No, not at all. And that's the thing about these health things that, and it's like kind of like it brings up a lot of sadness, but it's like these resistances that exist in our path are allowing the water to flow where it's supposed to go. So if I'm still having these reactions, it's an invitation to go back and use my coping mechanisms and understand that my body and my soul and my spirit have everything I need in order to cope with the situation. But we have to be careful about spiritually bypassing, because as we use these coping mechanisms, we need to understand and give ourselves credit for the fact that it's really happening. The emotional response is really happening. And when we do that, if we are on a spiritual path that coincides with our mental health path and our psychological healing path, um, and we're able to understand that the sensations are real, the flashbacks are real, the shivering is real, like, then we give spirit space and God space to move in and also be real with us. um and what really feels divine and feels so important to say is that once we acknowledge how hard the reality is, we are automatically, by our very honesty and vulnerability, not only with ourselves but with the experience around us, giving um, it's like a beacon where we can acknowledge that God is that big too, and even bigger, right? I remember when I was in my church phase hearing things over and over again, like, God will help you carry this, or by the power of God, that. And at the time, of course, like, a lot of my worship was very outward to God. And I wasn't really able to process the fact that God can really do those things without abandoning my body in order to, like, escape it and go to where God must be. And in my journey, I have now found, hey bird, that God is in my body and in my DNA and in my head and in my heart and in every energy center in my body and my feet and in my life and in the people that I interact with and in my bed frame and in the bird that just flew by. Like, God is in all of those things. And it does not serve my connection to God to leave my body and go get spirit, right? It serves my connection to God to lean into my experience and invite the only power in this universe that can provide relief from that. And God is a very strong word. I know it doesn't resonate with everyone. But for those of you that are doing work with deities, higher self, the universe, the earth, all of these things that are, I don't like saying, I mean, I would experience them as supernatural, because the thing is, when we are in our natural experience of pain and suffering, it can be easy for us to lean into our amnesia and forget that we are here for a purpose and we are here to learn. And there are so many angels that are here to remind us. And then there are moments when we don't want to be reminded and we just want to be comforted by the love of the universal collective consciousness that is always available to us on the inside, right? That feels a little preachy, but that's what's been true for me and my journey. Let's see if there's anything else in there. Yeah. So, I don't want any of my explanations of my resistances to be projected onto the experience of empathic or psychic abilities, but I do want to be honest and authentic about how it was for me, because I remember when I was coming into knowing these things, and it felt like there was a lot of joy and happiness around it. I saw a lot of empaths blaming other people for their suffering instead of setting psychic and emotional boundaries. I also saw psychics really taking advantage of their skills to manipulate people. And that's what magic is. Magic is just energy, and it doesn't have an ethical value in itself, but it moves through people. And whatever filter that you are wearing, so like if I'm in this relationship with this person who has all these psychic abilities and they are wearing the filter of their trauma and defensiveness, if they have a story in their head that they really want me to validate, then their magic is going to come out in a filter that invites me to validate that story. and continue to play into their reality, because we do all create our own reality, and not everyone that's creating reality around us is doing it for the higher good of the collective. In fact, most of them are doing it for prosperity. Even some of them are doing it just so that they can work through their own traumatic experiences. And that's totally valid. It's not our responsibility to stop people from playing out their trauma on us. It's our responsibility to set good boundaries so that when they do try to play their trauma out on us, we can have compassion and we can comfort them, and say goodbye when it's time, and cut cords when we're ready. You know what I mean? So that's kind of I guess there's still more. There's something more about like the psychic part of it, because the empath thing is, there's a lot of information about what it's like to be an empath. And I think that what it's like to be a psychic is really painted by psychics that we see. And for me, I think that with a history of mental health struggles in my family, and the psychic abilities that I witnessed being um, punished, honestly, punished and taken advantage of, it was very easy for me to assume that if I were to lean into my powers, I would see things that I didn't want to see, and experience things that I didn't want to experience, right? Talk about early childhood stuff. Like, that's kind of what it's like. I'm very blessed to have very vivid memories, and I've been doing a lot of time traveling and revisiting my inner child to just listen to them about their experience. Listen to me. That's so sweet. And what I found in those time traveling experiences was that there was much more psychic phenomenon and paranormal phenomenon going on than anyone in that reality at the time could admit, um, or could allow. And now I feel like, as I am on my reparenting journey to reparent my inner child, and on my high priestess journey to bring healing to the world, there is a lot of permission to just receive. And I guess I lost the thread about the patriarchy, so we're coming back around. Um, Receiving and being empathic and knowing the answer just by looking at someone. These are all feminine. They're on the feminine side of the spectrum, which, the spectrum is very nebulous, right? And you can be on your way to full feminine and hit a pocket of masculine. You know what I mean? Like, it's not what we think of when we think of the gender binary. Those of you that watch my videos know that. But in a patriarchal society, and in our Western world where masculinity is exalted even in its most toxified form, a very pure feminine is a huge threat to that. Someone who is embodied in their abilities and can tell the truth about something is the enemy of someone who thrives on lies and deceit, right? So and I've only done this with masculine people, so I'll speak from that frame, but when my feminine is fully bloomed, I can see it all. And I have to keep lots of myself. Like, a lot. And that's what has taught me to let people have their journey, because when I can see it all, I don't know which parts are for me. I don't know which parts are for someone else. And so I rest easy in the integrity and the assumption that they're going to take care of that. Whatever it is, they're going to do it. And if they need anything from me, I'm a beacon of light and support for them. But it is not my business to go in and do that shit, right? But in these early days of practicing with the masculine and seeing all of these lies and deceptions, leaning into my femininity was really an affront. And it you can tell when someone who's trying to manipulate you knows that you're not going to let them. And sometimes it makes them softer. Sometimes it makes them harder and they leave your life. But generally speaking, um, if they can sense it, which people that have very high level of manipulation skills, they do have a level of sense. That's my theory, is that that's how they get so good at it. Um, But, coming at them with a soft heart is very challenging. And in my experience, it requires a lot of practice with understanding when it's really about listening to spirit and knowing what to say and where to speak. Because I don't want to deny the masculine an opportunity to feel my nurturing feminine and understand that I am a soft place to rest these egoic, deceitful patterns. Um, I would love if I could flip a switch and heal the masculine just by being that way. But part of the way that the patriarchy prevents magic from really thriving is by the oppression of the feminine. And, the woman, especially the very magical woman, is considered last on the list for someone to take care of, when really they are exerting all of their energy to care for the world around them. And so we have very much flipped the idea of what it is like to honor and respect someone when they say, like, check on your strong friends. Like, these people, I know so many very strong, capable people who are doing this magical work. They're not even doing it for abundance. They're doing it to birth a new world and bring miracles to the world and heal everyone else around them. And they still get the short end of the stick with people just projecting the patriarchy onto them constantly, when they're some of the most exalted people in the spirit realm that can birth with their womb and create new life, the original manifestation. You know what I mean? So there's my patriarchy rant about that and my experience with that. I know that's not the experience for all women or all feminine people, but it has definitely been my experience. And part of that is because it's been my journey to learn how to, you know, I come from a lineage of psychic women that have been hurt because they know too much and can do too much, right? So it is a part of my journey to confront these situations where I am being challenged in my abilities, or abilities are being misused against me, so that I have the opportunity to not only stand up for myself, but to seek out the divine powers that are available to me. I'm very articulate, but it's not going to be my skills in speaking that help me set a boundary. It's going to be my spiritual support that I have cultivated and that is always available to me, so that when I am in a situation where I need to set some kind of boundary that's really triggering because of my lineage, um, that there will be powers far stronger than I am that are on my side, simply by my own humble seeking of their help, and by my ability to let go of whatever narrative I have going on in my head. When I go to spirit for help about, like, you know, and that's the thing, is I'm learning how to be psychic right now. So most of the things that I'm trying to go into is like, is this feeling real? Is what I'm seeing real? Are these experiences real? And as someone who has been raised on gaslighting, it's very difficult for me to know what's real and what's not. And in this new world, I'm being invited to understand why gaslighting was a part of my journey. Because in this reality where we have amnesia, waking up requires us to really validate our own experience, even when no one else will. And what spirit invites me to do when I'm challenged by that narrative, when the narrative is holding me with a fist like this, spirit says just relax about the narrative. It's not about the story, it's about the strength, it's about the feeling that it gives you. And what happens when I release the story of, like, oh no, this is gonna happen and they're gonna do that and like everything's gonna blah blah blah, is sorry, I'm so popular. Is I get to see, what can I do about this situation? What can I change about my behavior or my experience or my reality right now that will bring me a sense of peace of mind, even when everything is crumbling around me? I don't have any control over other people's decisions or actions. And this is how using my psychic and empathic abilities is a benefit rather than a hindrance. If I'm going into other people trying to control their world, if I'm like, hey, I need you to not have really big feelings so that I cannot have to experience your big feelings? Thanks. Like, if that's the energy that I'm coming at the world with, I'm using my abilities improperly, right? But if I'm coming at the world with, wow, I'm feeling feelings that aren't mine, right? I'm experiencing something that is really doesn't have that much to do with me. So I invite my higher self and my spirit guides and my God to come into my body and into my heart and into my experience and show me what parts of this are about me. What can I do in this situation, right? What power do I have? And the answer is often, you have a lot of power. The answer is often, you know, this may not be for you, or this is triggering something from the past. And, um, I am able to show up with more compassion rather than more control, which I think that in this journey of understanding my abilities, it's really, I mean, I still will never call myself an empath or a psychic unless you catch me slipping. You know what I mean? Like, I'm definitely a sex witch. That's the closest I'll get to a magical identity. Um, but I get to move a little closer to being compassionate in those situations if I honor the fact that I am hypersensitive to that energetic stuff. And it's my responsibility and my honor to care for that quality instead of um, instead of making it everybody else's problem. You know what I mean? That feels good. I feel so exhausted. I can't believe I talked for 31 minutes. I thought it was going to be like 5. So, in short, while I do have empathic abilities and I do have psychic abilities, I'm not an empath or a psychic. I am a human being. And just like all of you, every single person watching this and every single person not watching this, I have abilities that some people would perceive as supernatural, but they are entirely 100% human. And by releasing my fear around those abilities, I was able to step into them. So if you're feeling like you're not an empath or you're not a psychic and you could never reach this level, my invitation is to find the story behind why it would be so wild or unheard of or inappropriate or not for you, and really unpack the story, because chances are there's some wounds there. Um, and I hope that by all of us examining our wounds around these magical abilities, we can really start to wake up the world and step into a co created reality that we can all consent to and enjoy. I'm sending you lots of love.